So tonight's film was a documentary by Lauren Greenfield. Her previous film was The Queen of Versailles. It came out in 2012, and it was a film I watched during A Year with Women that I really liked and thought about for a long time afterwards. She had another film called Thin that I have not seen yet, but I'm going to seek out, and has mostly worked for the last 25 years as a photographer, specifically photographing wealth, celebrity, and sort of that veneer of excess, right? So this documentary is sort of a exploration of this excess as well as a retrospective of her career. A book was put together as well of all her photographs um, that she took over the 25 years, sort of starting in the 90s through, I guess, with 2016 is probably the last photographs featured in the book as it came out last year. In the documentary, you find out sort of how she began documenting wealth and why she continues to do this and why this has become her life's work. You also have her visiting some of the subjects of her photographs at various times in their lives, and that I found the most fascinating because you saw sort of various people change, including the woman who was a very young porn star who was all wrapped up in the Charlie Sheen debacle a couple years, 10 years ago, whenever that was. I found her story particularly sad, actually. And there's one woman who's featured in the trailer, and if you only thought you knew of this woman's story from the trailer, you would get a completely different idea of what her story was and what her drive was than the reality of her story from what you get in the documentary. So it's balanced in sort of three parts where you're introduced to Greenfield and her career and what she does and how she got to where she became, how she started out trying to document Native peoples, similar to her mother, who was an anthropologist, but didn't just turned because her degree is in anthropology, and then she turned it into sort of a socio anthropology of contemporary time, right? And then how that shifted to deciding to do this retrospective, and then the interviews with people, and then interviews with them later. And some of them are because she was working on this documentary for the last 10 years after the housing boom, which it was right around when she was doing Queen of Versailles, because that started to be one documentary and ended up being a different documentary after that, the Great Recession. So there's a lot of different people who are interviewed, including there's a white collar criminal, Florian Hom, who apparently went to Harvard with her, because his discussion of what Harvard is made me cackle, and it made everyone in the theater laugh, actually, because Harvard just sounds awful. Coming from a family apparently of generations of Harvard graduates on Lauren Greenfield's side, or at least her parents and her. So the film has a similar sort of feel to it as Camera Person, except in Camera Person, her looking at her life and her career, she looked at the way she was implicit in sort of documenting humanity, but also subjectifying humanity, right? Or objectifying humanity. And how doing the work that she did, she almost lost touch with what the humans behind what she was documenting. That was sort of what I got from Camera Person. In this film, she instead is sort of trying to understand why she's so drawn to documenting wealth, and through that, why these people who are so obsessed with wealth, not just money wealth, but other aspects of wealth, including the commodification of beauty, why that's so fascinating, and why people who are drawn to it in the extreme are drawn the way they are. So the documentary doesn't quite have, I mean, it sort of has a thesis in that what you find from everybody is that like money, as we all know, money can't buy happiness, money can't buy love, and that the best thing in life and true wealth is doing what you love and being with your family, right? So it's a little hallmarky at the end, but the journey that it takes to get to that is really fascinating, and the stories she's able to pull out of her subjects are really interesting. Um, though I don't know that all of the comparisons and juxtapositions quite work. And from the posters, you would think it's just about American wealth, but she follows the boom of the '80s and the growth of late capitalism through both America, Iceland, and Iceland banking boom. Does not mention how Bjork saved that country, though. That's not in this documentary. And the new wealth in China. And true to her nature, she doesn't spend as much time outside of America as she does her American subjects. Um, but the subjects range from the porn star to um, a woman who is the like main nightlife VIP hostess in all of Las Vegas to Magic City here in Atlanta. She actually did a short documentary on Magic City, which is one of the strip clubs here in Atlanta, to her own children and the way in which she herself is obsessed with this documentation and how she's a workaholic and how that reflects a similar obsession to those who are obsessed with their wealth and accumulation. So I don't know if the documentary 100% works. It's definitely not as insightful as it could be. There were definitely some interesting talking heads, both the people as well as experts. And actually, it had a bibliography at the end of the credits that I kind of want to track down and find all the books that she read. Because for the amount of books that she read, there wasn't a lot of, it didn't feel like there was a lot of knowledge, just a lot of ideas and some like armchair sociology, which I'm not opposed to, but there were a few moments where I feel like some conclusions were drawn that weren't fleshed out as well as they could have been. And it maybe would have been a stronger documentary if it had just really been about her looking at her work rather. And I think that's what it was trying to be, but there was like too much with the subjects for it to be all about her and her work with them, but not enough with the subjects to make it not about her work and her work with them. So it doesn't quite work. But the moments that do work and the moments that are that tap into something truly humane and universal about ourselves are really good. So it's not the best documentary I've seen this year, and definitely not as good as The Queen of Versailles. The Queen of Versailles had a lot to say and said it really elegantly. But there's definitely some moments in this movie that everyone in the theater was just like, "What the fuck?" Which I always enjoy. So if you like a movie about extremes, this is a movie for you. It is, I think, wide right now. It's in a whole bunch of cities, so it's probably playing near you. Hopefully, check it out. Lauren Greenfield's Generation Wealth, another compelling documentary here in 2018, the year of documentaries.